today's video is about the Taniwha of New Zealand. I do have several artists' work in this, and I don't always know who to credit, so if I have your artwork and you want to credit, please let me know. Thank you.
What are Taniwha? Taniwha are supernatural creatures in Māori tradition, similar to serpents and dragons in other cultures. They were said to hide in the ocean, rivers, lakes or caves. Some Taniwha would eat and kill people, or kidnap women. Others were believed to be guardians for a tribe, and people would offer them gifts and say a karakia, a spell. What did they look like? Some were like giant lizards, sometimes with wings. Others were reptile-like sea creatures. Or they took the shape of sharks or whales, or even logs of wood in the river. Some could change their shape. Famous Taniwha the explorer Kupe had a guardian Taniwha, Tuharangi, who guided and protected canoes in Cook Strait. Much later, a friendly dolphin named Pelorus Jack swam with ships in this area. Some Maori believe Pelorus Jack was Tuharangi in dolphin form. The Taniwha Tutaeporoporo began life as a shark. A chief caught him and kept him as a pet in a river. Then Tutaeporoporo changed, growing scaly skin, wings, webbed feet and a bird-like head. He began eating people traveling on the river. To catch him, a Taniwha slayer, Aukehu, hid inside a hollow log in the river. The Taniwha smelt him, and swallowed the log. Slashing his way out of the Taniwha's stomach, Aukehu soon killed him. Inside the Taniwha were the remains of people and canoes that he had eaten. A female Taniwha, Hine Korako, married a human. When his relatives insulted her, she escaped to Te Reinga waterfall near Wairoa. But she still protected the local people. One day the river was in flood, and some travelers in a canoe came dangerously close to the waterfall. Hine Korako held back the canoe and saved their lives. Taniwha today. In 2002, the Ngāti Naho people in Waikato opposed a plan for a highway. They said it would destroy the lair of their Taniwha, Karutahi. As a result, the highway was built in a different area. In Northland, members of Ngāpuhi opposed the building of a prison. They believed there was a Taniwha, in the form of a log, in nearby waterways. They said the building would stop the Taniwha from moving around. However, the prison was built. Although not all Maori believe in Taniwha, they are still important to many. Many Taniwha were associated with the sea. A large number were said to have come with the voyaging canoes that brought the Polynesian ancestors of the Maori people to Aotearoa, New Zealand. Tuharangi Kupe was the great navigator who is reputed to have discovered New Zealand while traveling in the Matawheorua canoe. He placed one of his guardian Taniwha, Tuharangi, in Cook Strait. Tuharangi guided and protected canoes, and was later believed to have reappeared in the form of a well-known dolphin named Pelorus Jack, which accompanied ships in this stretch of water. Aredaru and her sons. Aredaru was a female Taniwha, believed to have escorted the Mamari canoe to New Zealand from Hawaii. In other traditions, Aredaru and another Taniwha named Ruamano guided the Takitimu canoe. When she arrived, Aredaru gave birth to 11 sons. All went exploring, and on the way they dug trenches, creating the branches of the Hokianga harbor. One son, Waihau, burrowed inland and lashed his tail about to form Lake Omapuri. Another, Oopa, was angered by the large number of rocks he encountered, and came to hate all living things. He terrorized the people near the Panguru Mountains. Aredaru was a guardian of the Hokianga harbor, and had her lair in a cave there. She lived at the south head of the harbor, and her companion, known by some as Niua, lived in the north head. Wataitai and Naki were also sea Taniwha who created Wellington Harbor. In tradition, the harbor was once a lake in which these Taniwha lived. But Naki was restless and smashed his way through to nearby Cook Strait. Wataitai tried to get out a different way and became stranded on dry ground. It is said that his spirit took the form of a bird named Tekeo, which flew to the top of Wellington's Mount Victoria and mourned, Tangi. Hence the name of the mountain, Tangi Tekeo. Taniwha were also believed to inhabit lakes, rivers and other freshwater areas. Lake Roto Atera Te Tau Aporirua was a Taniwha from Heratonga, Hastings, said to live on the Ruataniwha Plains. A chief named Tara was responsible for capturing this Taniwha, which had killed many people. Tara made a giant hinaki, eel pot, put in 200 dogs as bait and set the pot in the Roto Atera Lake. Lured by the dogs, the Taniwha entered the trap. Tara then dragged the creature ashore and killed it. When it was cut open, more than 200 victims were found inside. They were buried, and the Taniwha was eaten by Tara and his people. Te Rayanga waterfall Hine Korako was a female Taniwha who married a human named Tane Kino. They had a child named Torina. Some of Tane Kino's relatives insulted Hine Korako, so she left and went to live under Te Rayanga waterfall in Wairoa. But she remembered her ties to the community when the Wairoa River was in flood, threatening the lives of some. An old man called out to her as a canoe was being swept towards the falls. She managed to slow the canoe and then push it upstream so that those on board were saved. Waipapa Waterhole in the 1870s, Mohi Tere, an elder of Ngāti Porou, sent a letter in to the Maori language newspaper Te Waka Maori o Niu Tarani. He described the case of a girl who was said to have been killed by a Taniwha. On 20 December 1876, 4 young girls had gone to bathe in a waterhole at Waipapa. This spot was renowned as the lair of a Taniwha named Taminamina. While 3 of the girls began to bathe, the 4th, Mariana, swam to the other side of the waterhole, climbed out onto the rocks, and began sucking nectar from the red flowers of the sacred rata tree. Suddenly, she slipped back into the water. Her friend Rahera tried to grab her, but failed. The 2 other girls screamed, because they saw the water whirling near where she had fallen, and knew it to be the Taniwha named Taminamina who had got their friend. Rahera dived to find her, but could not. Rahera swam to shallow waters and then saw the water was rising into waves. Days later Mariana was found, back on the rock where she had slipped. But when a group came to get her body, she had once again disappeared. An elder believed she had been taken by the Taniwha as punishment for sucking the flowers of the sacred rata tree. Narara Warau. It was believed that many Taniwha took the form of giant reptiles. They were known as Narara, and less commonly as Kumi. One that is known by tribes throughout New Zealand as Narara Warau. In one tradition, Narara Warau wreaked havoc first at Waimarama in Hawke's Bay before visiting his sister, Parai Ka Fiti, in the Wairarapa. When he left his cave in Waimarama, his scales remained and became tuatara, lizard-like reptiles. He began to eat passing travelers until eventually one escaped and returned home, alerting his people. The chief of the village came up with a strategy to capture and kill the Taniwha. Along the path used by Narara Warau a number of trees were cut almost to the point of falling. A spell was cast on a dog, which was then sent to the Taniwha's cave. It barked, provoking the Taniwha to give chase. Pursuing the dog, Narara Warau reached the cut trees and struck them, making them fall. He tried to wriggle out, but all the trees fell and crushed him. Takeri Piripiri looked like a giant tuatara with a spiky tail. He acted as guardian at Otautahanga Pa, a stronghold of the Ngāti Raukawa tribe. The people prospered under his protection, and would place a basket of the best food below the walls of his cave. One day, a gift of eels was mostly eaten by the people who brought it. All that was left were the eelheads. In his anger Takeri Piripiri ate those who had taken his food. He then went to the Mangakawa range, where he began to eat the travelers passing by. Eventually, warriors from the Ngāti Hawa tribe trapped him in a giant, cage-like eel pot, and speared him to death. Some Taniwha took the shape of sharks. The northern bay of Maunganui, meaning Great Shark, is named after a guardian Taniwha, in the form of a giant shark, that accompanied the canoe Ryukaramea into the harbor. There are several stories of these Taniwha in Maori tradition. Pania and Mormor, Pania of the Reef, is one of the great romantic stories in Maori tradition. Pania was a sea maiden who swam ashore at sunset and returned to the sea before dawn. She would hide in a clump of flax beside a freshwater spring at the foot of Hukariri Cliff in Napier. One day Karitoki, a chief in the area, was thirsty and came to the spring for a drink. He caught sight of Pania, and took her home to be his wife. But every morning Pania would return to the sea. After some time Pania had a son, Mormor, who was without hair. The chief worried that he might lose his son and wife to the sea people. He consulted a tohunga, who told him that if he placed cooked food on the mother and child while they slept, they would never return to the sea. He did this, but the ritual did not work and Pania was turned into a rock, forever in the ocean. Mormor became a Taniwha in the form of a shark. He lived in a cave in the sea, and his descendants used to frequent the Ahuriri harbor. He was a kaitiaki, guardian, patrolling the coastal waters and inner harbors while his people fished and gathered seafood. Tutaʻiporoporo, the renowned Taniwha of the Wanganui River, also began life as a shark. A chief named Twariki caught a shark and kept him as pet in a nearby river. The shark soon grew until he was as large as a whale. Then he began to change, with hard, spiky skin, bat-like wings, a lizard-like tail, webbed feet and claws like a hawk's. His head became like that of a featherless bird, but he retained shark's teeth. Later the chief Twariki was killed by warriors from Wanganui. Tutaʻiporoporo set out to avenge his master's death, making his way to the mouth of the Wanganui River. He made his home in a cave under a high cliff. After a while, some canoes came down the river. The Taniwha swam out and, though the people tried to escape, he swallowed them and their canoes whole. This was the first time he had tasted human flesh, and he liked it. He devoured everyone who traveled down the river. They began to look for ways to slay him. An old chief named Tama advised them to find Aukehu, renowned as a Taniwha slayer. They did, and Aukehu returned with them to Wanganui, taking 70 people and 2 maripi, shark-tooth weapons. He got his people to take a log and hollow it out so that a man would fit inside. A lid was then made. Aukehu got in, the lid was fitted, and any holes in the log were filled with clay to make it watertight. The Taniwha Tutaʻiporoporo smelt Aukehu, and came down and swallowed the log. Then Aukehu used his maripi to cut the ties around his container and slash his way out of the Taniwha's stomach. Tutaʻiporoporo was soon defeated. When his body floated to the river bank, the people came and cut a hole in it. Inside they found people, canoes, weapons, tools and pounamu, greenstone, pendants. They buried the people, and left the body of the Taniwha for the birds and fish. In some traditions, Taniwha took the shape of whales. One story tells of 4 such Taniwha, Hain Kotia, Hain Makehu, Hain Korito and Hain Hurahuru, who escorted the voyaging canoe Takidimu from Hawaii, the Polynesian homeland. Another, Pain Irera, was a Taniwha who swam with the Tainui canoe from Hawaii. The famed East Coast ancestor, Kahutiaterangi, later known as Paikia, was rescued from drowning by a Taniwha in the form of a whale. In another story, Te Tahi o Te Rangi, a well-known Tohunga, priest, from Whakatane, was abandoned by his people on Whakari, White Island. He chanted a spell and called up the great whale-shaped Taniwha Tutarakauika, who took him back to the mainland. It was believed that a Taniwha that acted as a protector for Ngati Tamatira of Hauraki would take the form of a dolphin and play about in the river to warn its people of an impending invasion. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, a white dolphin known as Pelorus Jack guided ships across a dangerous stretch of water around French Pass, in the Marlborough Sounds. Some Maori believed that this dolphin was Tuharangi, a Taniwha that had escorted the explorer Kupe from the traditional homeland, Hawaii. In 1900, a correspondent for the Maori-language newspaper Te Pipiwhareroa described this dolphin playfully escorting his steamer near the French Pass. He described it as an ika tipawa, supernatural fish, and suggested it could be a Taniwha. In the far north in the summer of 1955–56, a friendly female dolphin delighted thousands of children and adults by playing with them in the sea at Opononi. Nicknamed Opo, she was believed by many Maori in the area to be a Taniwha. Enchanted logs were known as rikau tipawa. Other things such as fish, dogs, stones, trees, and mountains might also be described as tipawa. For example, a Koatu tipawa was an enchanted rock. But rikau tipawa in particular were usually thought to be Taniwha. Whaiwhaia was an enchanted log which was mainly seen drifting in rivers in the Waikato area. However, it was believed to have traveled to other areas, including the South Island. Because of the numerous places it was seen, a saying arose, "Na panga hi rau o Whaiwhaia," the many stranding places of Whaiwhaia. At Waikarimoana there was a log, known as tutawa, which would sing. When the ethnographer Elsden Best heard it, he compared the sound to the whistling of the wind. Others would say, "Ko tutawa I waiata hair ana," it is tutawa singing as it goes. A Taniwha named Humu Humu acted as a guardian of the Mahuhu canoe on its voyage to New Zealand. Later he acted as a guardian for his people, Ngati Watua in Kaipara. He was seen as a totara log drifting in a lagoon near the harbour. Like other Rakau Tipawa, he was recognized as a Taniwha because he moved against the currents. He was said to have finally disappeared because his people had taken shellfish from his lagoon. Another enchanted log was Mataura, who would mourn the death of a chiefly person by appearing as a huge tree on the water. Although many Taniwha were kaitiaki, or protectors of Iwi and Hapu, tribes and sub-tribes, others were killers, sparking the need for heroic slayers. They often used ingenious methods to capture the dangerous creatures. Pataka Hotupuku, a Taniwha on the Kaingaroa Plains, was lured out by some fast runners acting as decoys. He raced into a large noose woven from cabbage tree leaves. Led by Pataka, these slayers used a different method for a Taniwha named Pekahawa in Rotorua. They wove a large basket from supplejack and bush lawyer, and decorated it with pigeon feathers. Some of the men climbed into the basket and were lowered into the depths of a spring, where they said karakia, charms, to weaken the Taniwha. Pataka placed a noose around the Taniwha, tugged on the rope, and the rope was pulled up, killing the creature. Kaifari was a Taniwha who lived near Manuko Harbor in an underwater cave and blowhole, named the Gap, south of Piha. After being lured out, he was killed by a man named Tamuri with a special mirror, club, that had the power to destroy Taniwha. Te Kaifukuruaki was a fearsome Taniwha who lived near Collingwood, in Golden Bay. A seal hunter tried to slay him by punching him in the snout. The first blow hurt the Taniwha, but on the second blow the hunter's hand went into the Taniwha's gaping mouth, along with the rest of him. Patoru, a chief from Arahura, had a more successful strategy. His party divided into three, the first to lure the Taniwha into a trap, and the other two groups to flank him. One would attack, and as he swung to them they would retreat and the other group would attack. This plan succeeded and the beast was slain. In many cases, like the dragon slayers of old, these heroes also rescued young women in distress from the clutches of the Taniwha, and were rewarded with their love. Here is a translation of a karakia, charm, to slay a Taniwha. Let the monster sleep. The monster there, vast as a rock he lies. How angrily his eyeballs glare. How flash his fiery eyes. Come sleep, come sleep. Let the slumberous spells be laid in depths below, in depths below. Let sleep be as of night, like the great night, the long night, the sleep-bringing night, sleep on, sleep on. In the early 2000s, two construction projects caused debate because they were planned for areas where Taniwha were believed to live. In 2002, the Ngāti Naho Hapu in Waikato objected to construction of a highway in a particular area, because it would destroy the lair of one of their Taniwha, known as Karutahi. Eventually, Transit New Zealand agreed to partially reroute the highway. The building of a prison in Ngāwhā, Northland, was also opposed because of belief in a Taniwha. Takaware, a Taniwha in the form of a log, was said to have been created by a Ngāpuhi ancestress, Karariki. While he was mainly located at Lake Omapuri, he was also believed to manifest himself at Ngāwhā Springs and other geothermal areas. Local Hapu were concerned that the prison would impede his travel. Ultimately, against these objections the prison was built. In both cases, raising Taniwha as an objection led to controversy. Some people suggested that the objection was an attempt to get compensation, and that the Taniwha could be paid to go away. Even among Maori there was disagreement as to whether the concerns about Taniwha were genuine or not. Witi Ihamira, author of The Whale Rider, says that he has a kaitiaki, guardian, which is a Taniwha. Her name is Haine Te Ariki and she lives in the Waipawa River. When Tahu Potiki was chief executive officer of the administrative body of the Gai Tahu people, he expressed disbelief in Taniwha. However, he noted that, the old Maori view of the world allowed for Taniwha, as they explained descent lines from the gods. While debate continues, Taniwha continue to play an important role in the cultural identity of many tribal groups.